Okay, so I'll start by unmuting you all so we can have a quick conversation. Again, I welcome you all here today. I want to start off with, it's kind of funny, you learn the difference between essential and critical right off the bat. And you guys are used to seeing me with a coffee cup in front of me. And I learned yesterday that coffee was not essential delivery item. And I've now resorted to our stock of Pepsi in-house. So it's a adjustment for everybody, even with the little things. The other thing that amazed me was last Wednesday, we talked about, I brought out the fact that what better way to teach kids math and angles and everything else was nothing more than building a birdhouse and working with your kids, trying to introduce them to the construction field. The response to that was overwhelming, as well as the response to, do you have plans to your birdhouse? My response at that point was, do you have the internet? And so we are making our plans for our birdhouse available. The other piece of that, if you have young kids making birdhouses, somebody stepped up and said, let's have a contest. Why don't you have people send pictures in? So we are having a contest. It'll run for the next 2 weeks. If you have young ones, grandchildren, neighbors, don't get too close to the neighbors. If you have people building birdhouses, employees with their kids building birdhouses, please take 2 pictures, one during development and one during the final, and we'll have them reviewed. And we've been donated 5 $50 gift cards to Home Depot that we'll award to, I don't know what the categories are yet. We're working through the finite details of this. But we'll have a showing of birdhouses out on the website. We'll have a judging, and we'll award 5 $50 gift cards to our youth for their participation in the birdhouse competition. Again, I've done mine. I haven't painted it yet. I got to find some young person to paint it for me. But we have a full set of plans for a birdhouse. It is cut out of a single piece of wood, a 3/4 by 6, 1 by 6 by 8 foot board. There'll be about 40 inches left over when you're all done. It actually spells out how to put it together. And we also incorporated a second one I haven't built yet that is a more of the typical type of birdhouse. They both use a 1.5 inch hole to allow the birds to come in, because with a 1.5 inch entry hole, you attract a larger variety of birds to come and nest. So I do invite you all to have your kids, your grandkids, your employees' kids to participate. Send those pictures in to, rjw@agcvt.org. We'll put that out there so they know where to send them. Again, a picture of the production and a picture of completion, and there's 5 $50 gift cards through Home Depot that we'll be awarding at the end of this project. So again, I hope you participate. We'd love to see you participate. I'll also tell you, going into this, we were one of the few that were actually doing this, and I am seeing the proliferation of a lot of others and a lot more information than was out there a week ago. And next week we will be shifting our info sessions down. Next week's will just be on Friday at 10 and 2 just on Friday at 10 to 2. And I appreciate all your support. I appreciate the quick little emails and texts to that text hotline of 802-793-5659 telling us we're doing a great job. I appreciate everything you guys are doing and everything we're able to help you do. If you want to talk to us, we are manning our phones here. It's 802-229-9189. Send in to us. Today, we have Lindsay Kurrle actually joining us, and I'm watching for her as we speak.
She's Kitty.
And I believe...
Thank you, Richard.
Great. So we have Lindsay Kurrle joining us today. What I'd like to just spell out a few rules so that we can make this work. And I know, Lindsay, you're scheduled in here for 15 or 20 minutes, if I'm correct. You do have a press conference to get to here shortly.
Yeah.
So that all being said, what I'm going to do, or ask everybody to try to help me with, is I'm going to mute everybody. I'm going to give Lindsay the floor. And if we have questions of Lindsay, what I would like to do is we have the chat panel on the bottom of your screen. We have a chat panel. And if you have questions of Lindsay, we can, at the end of 10 minutes or so, stop this and I will ask Lindsay your requested questions. And Lindsay, I'm trying to find...
She's Kitty.
I'm being told you aren't actually Lindsay, you are Kitty, and I'm trying to find you.
Up. There.
I'm able to unmute myself. Do you want me to jump in?
Lindsay, the floor is yours, and thank you for joining us today. I hope you were here when we were talking about building our birdhouses, and I look forward to having one of you or your husband actually compete in this contest, because I would put your construction level at the same level as our youth.
Can I have my son build it and pass it off as mine?
Yes, go right ahead. You're going to be eliminated anyway.
Yeah, I figured. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me. And I wish I could see all of your faces, but I will say that when this is all behind us, which it will be behind us, we're going to have some really funny stories to share about different video conferencing bloopers. Some of you may have heard that the House and Senate Ag Committee was hosting a Zoom meeting recently, and it was hacked into, and there was inappropriate activity joined their meeting. So anyway, it will give us like some amount of humor, something to help us get through this. But so anyway, I know it's been a really tough couple of weeks, and I recognize how adversely impactful the mitigation measures that have been put into place have hit you all, and I just want to say thank you. I know there's a lot of frustration and a lot of disappointment, and I've been pleasantly surprised by how kind folks have been, despite the fact that they are in a position of sort of having to halt and cease their operations right now. And I just want you to know that I do recognize the commitment that you're making, the sacrifice you're making, and I do believe that our mitigation measures are working. So thank you. The other thing I wanted to just bring up to you is that our agency has worked very diligently to try to bring online what I would call a one-stop landing page for folks who have been impacted adversely by the COVID-19 virus. And if you go to the accd.vermont.gov website, you'll find what I'm talking about. And the goal here was to make sure that employers, self-employed individuals, communities had a place to click and learn about some of the recovery tools or relief that they could predict were coming their way and soon. Obviously, there are things that people need right now, immediately, cash is king. And then there are some longer term recovery tools that are being built out. A lot of what's on that page right now are federal funds that are coming our way to help us during this crisis. And we are also working closely with the legislature to make sure that if there are holes, and we know there are still areas that we need to address, that we can work with the legislature so that we can lift some recovery tools and packages that would help even further. So we're on that. The big news of today is that people are able to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. This is a direct federal loan, and I'm sure some of you have heard some of the details, but for those of you that don't know, this is a loan that employers up to 500 people or 500 FTEs are eligible to apply for. And if the money is used to cover your payroll and some other eligible expenses, you are eligible to have that loan forgiven up to 8 weeks of your payroll expenses. Some people are going to use this loan to do other things as well, build out various areas and whatnot, but just wanted to make note that this is forgivable if you keep your employees on payroll and keep them through this crisis. So it's a really great loan. One of the concerns about this loan, go ahead.
Lindsay, so
Yes.
what you probably can't see, but everybody else out there, and we'll talk about it after you're gone, we do have the Paycheck Protection Program borrower application up, and they can see it on their computers, and we'll talk about it after you're gone.
Okay, good. I see it up there. That's great.
Okay.
What I want to share to folks is so today's the day you can start applying for this, and you can talk with your lender, the lender you have a relationship with, and they can help you through this. If you don't have a particular lender that you already work with, you can get help from the SBA directly and also the Small Business Development Corp. But again, I would just mention to you, if you're wondering where to go to find that application in that form, if you go to accd.vermont.gov and click on the COVID-19 financial assistance, right on the front page, you'll see the COVID-19 image, and click on employers, and it will take you right to this application on the SBA's website. Also wanted to highlight to folks, if you don't know about it, there's something called the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and that's another loan that employers can apply for, and if they've been adversely impacted by this crisis. And by applying for this loan, you're automatically eligible to receive a $10,000 grant, and that is like faster cash. So if you are trying to make ends meet and you need a quick infusion of cash, we're being told that once your application is complete, that the turnaround is 3 days. Now, I'm going to set expectation and just caution you, that's what the hope is. You can imagine there's going to be arguably a great deal of interest in this, and so again, I would rather underpromise and overdeliver, but I'm just sharing with you what the federal government is telling us on the turnaround.
And Lindsay?
Oh, good.
I'm sorry I keep interrupting you, but I just clarification. As I understand this, that $10,000 loan, if you apply for that, you can't apply for the PPE one, or that $10,000 grant is taken off the front side of this PPP one.
I believe you are correct, Richard. I think, I wish we had Darcy Carter from the SBA here so you could confirm, but I think you are correct. You may apply for both, but if you do get that grant and take advantage of it, and then you later apply for and obtain the loan, yes, it will be taken off that loan amount.
And one
Or it
more.
will be reduced from that.
Yeah, one more. In that PPP loan, a SBA preferred lender, if your bank is an SBA preferred lender, they can process that in-house, and generally the turnaround they're expected is about 7 days, versus if you have to go through a regular SBA lender or SBA, you could be stuck in that hole for about 6 weeks.
Wow, thank you for letting me know that. I wasn't sure that that was the path, and it's good to know. I personally think that it would be great if you do start with your preferred lender, you know, somebody you have a relationship with anyway.
Okay. I'm sorry, you can keep going.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just trying to think about anything else. If there are folks on the phone who are self-employed, you probably heard that they have expanded the eligibility for unemployment benefit to self-employed or independent contractors, people who work alone. So again, even if you want to apply for some of these loans that I've just talked about, I've also encouraged people to also apply for that benefit if you're self-employed, because you can't certainly double dip, but you know, get both of them in the process, and you know, then you can decide, you know, if you get the unemployment benefit and it's not as much as you're used to receiving in a week, then you may want to supplement it with the payroll, the PPP. And again, you would only be forgiven for that amount over and above what you received through the unemployment benefits. So I just didn't want to encourage people to think that they could, you know, multiply this by 2. But definitely, if I were in your shoes, I would kind of get the balls rolling in all those directions.
So let me ask a tougher question for you. I just saw this come up. So I'm a contractor working in New Hampshire, and I send my guys over Monday through Friday. They come back on Friday night. I isolate those contractors or those employees over the weekend, and I send them back on the following Monday. Can I be doing that?
So that's a great question. If you want to be complying with the executive order, the order says if you leave the state for something that is considered non-essential services, 2 hours state, and then come back in, you need to self-isolate. Some people would use the quarantine word for 14 days. So right now, I know it's disappointing, but the guidance is that no, you are not able to just isolate for 2 days and then leave again. What I will say is that we all want to be reasonable and make sure that we're putting the health and safety of Vermonters first in this crisis. But what I would encourage you to do, and Richard, maybe you could take the lead on coordinating this, is if collectively you could coordinate and I'd say keep it to a page, but a proposal for some things that and again, I've heard from many of you, but putting together a proposal that we could consider that would address some of the things that you all think that we could consider that wouldn't back us up in terms of the progress we've made on taking some of these tough measures. So at the risk of providing too much hope, I do want you all to know there is hope, that this is not forever. And we want to try to make sure that when we start putting this in the reverse order, that we do it without just whipping the barn door wide open. We want to do it thoughtfully.
So
I'm smiling. I don't have my glasses on.
So our forever is April 15th, okay? I just want you to truly understand, when you say forever, that's April 15th. Now, as well as, I know we've got several people trucking material in and out, which is a different level, because we've been advising them not to remove themselves from the operator station and those essential materials that are needed across state lines, that was okay to do.
Yes,
As long as they didn't leave their operator stations and they didn't have contact with outside personnel.
yes, thank you for clarifying that. So if there's a major, infrastructure item that is needed for, national, like safety on another state, so to speak, certainly if you can find a way to get that transported, and as you mentioned, under the conditions you suggested, to clarify too, if you are, transporting an essential, an item that's deemed essential here in the state, and you leave the state and come back, then you are not having to, quarantine for 14 days. Obviously, we need you to keep going to get those essential, like whether it's medical supplies or fuel or whatever it might be. But again, we're asking people to be very diligent in trying to limit their exposure to other people.
So we've been working with OSHA, and I'll share it with you with this new charge you gave me to list out a few scenarios. We've been working with VOSHA and federal OSHA, as well as the Homeland Security folks, cyber infrastructure. I've learned so many of these little CISA, OS, so many of those little words. I don't know what they all stand for, but we've been working with those folks to put together work protocols, to put together policies and or plans in place, and I'll include those with you, with that charge you gave me, as well as a formal request to certainly abide by what our hope was. I'm not going to say rule, what our hope was to be able to, in some limited fashion, lift this order on April 15th and try to get some of us back to working on April 15th. So.
Yes, can I just add, something just to be thinking about. I have also heard from individuals over the last couple weeks, and there's so much anxiety out there, and believe it or not, so for those of you who don't know, I was an employer myself in the state for nearly 2 decades. And I know that as an employer, you feel compelled to make sure that you are making good on the contracts you have. People have time expectations. It's very difficult right now for us to suspend, because we know we're disappointing people and we're arguably letting people down, and we're concerned about somebody being angry. And on the flip side, I have employees that call me, and I'm not going to be specific to construction, but where these employees are, by virtue of the work they do, they're finding themselves put into a pickup truck with other people to go to even a critical, what's deemed a critical or essential place of business in their field, and they are struggling. They feel like they're being put at risk. So I would just say, when you're developing guidance that maybe we could consider, think about those mitigation measures as well, or separating people, even just getting to the site.
So on a personal note, Lindsay, I just want to tell you, my mother-in-law came up to spend some time with us over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and she's staying a little longer than expected. But on a high point, I've been able to justify my isolation at home from her, and I appreciate your help in that matter.
I hear you.
Richard, this is going to be
Show her the
broadcast.
love, Richard. I'm sure she's lovely.
Sorry, Lauren.
Again, I'll take a couple more questions, and then I do need to run, but I really want you all to know I appreciate everybody's patience, and I'm extremely empathetic to the situation you're all in.
Okay, so let me just see if I've got somebody's hand up here. I know Adam OSHA had a very good question yesterday. Adam, you were asking about the workman's comp piece, where right now I have a excavator operator that's at a 4-digit code for excavation operation, and we're paying him workman's comp rate of $5 versus a clerical worker that I'm only paying $1 for on the workman's comp side. And Lindsay, have you guys given any thought towards allowing us over this 4 or 6 week period to categorize those workers that are not exposed to an outside injury by recategorize them as all as clerical workers?
Wow, that's a great question that I cannot answer. I think I'm going to have to phone a friend on that one, use one of my lifelines. So I'll get back to you on that, but thank you for raising that. I'm sure somebody's thought about it, just hadn't crossed my radar yet.
Okay, and if you could get back to us, that would be a great one. And then I've got John Connor, who would like to ask a question. Go ahead, John. John? John. Anybody else with a question here?
Might have been.
Okay. Anybody else with a question for Lindsay today? Your mics are open. Hey, Lindsay. Thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you. I never talked to you before, and I have found our last 2 or 3 weeks interludes quite beneficial, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, same to you, same to you. Thank you so much, and I am looking forward to chatting with you all soon.
Bye now.
You just muted her.
Huh?
You muted her. Everyone's muted.
Yeah, I did. So, as Lindsay was saying, and it'll be out on our website tonight, it will be there, or actually in a few hours, but I want to reiterate to you all, certain banks are preferred SBA lenders. Certain banks are preferred SBA lenders. There's only one credit union, as I did my research. I can be corrected, of course, but I believe it's New England Community Credit Union is only one credit union that is actually a preferred SBA lender. There's several. I know the community bank, the old Merchants Bank, is a preferred lender, and I know NSB, or Northfield Savings Bank, is a preferred SBA lender. Those banks that are preferred SBA lenders can turn this around inside of a week because they're relying on those banks to make the decisions. If you go outside that preferred lender group, they will it will take you a couple weeks to get through this whole piece because they'll wait for SBA to give them the go-ahead on that triple P loan. So we will include that there. It's real easy to fill out. In filling it out, what they're going to ask you real easy, average monthly payroll to include payroll taxes. You multiply it by 2.5, and again they ask you to plus your EID, but your loan request in there, number of employees, and then how you're going to use it. And again, it's only that 2.5 times your monthly payroll plus payroll taxes and everything else in it. It's a pretty easy loan transaction or form. Should be easy. It will be on our site if you haven't found it from your bank, and it's what you have to submit. we are confused by some of the language on the PPE loan. If you do not have all of your employees remaining on payroll, do you still qualify for forgiveness? No. So the forgiveness is judged on a percentage basis to the amount of employees, your average monthly payroll of the employees that you have on hand right now versus the employees that you bring back. In order to get total forgiveness of this loan, you have to bring back 80% or greater of your employees for full-time employment, or in the same manner that they were employed before. If you bring back less than that 80% threshold, your forgiveness is based on that ratio. I hope I answered that. I've found out I know as much as anybody about any of this. Then I see John Connor. Did you finish that one? Or did I finish that one? Can they apply for PPE for the remaining weeks of the 8 weeks time frame to cover payroll expenses after? John, you're going to be able to apply, if I read this correctly, you can apply for this PPP loan through December 31. You can apply for this PPP loan through December 31. If I read it correctly, it's not just, you don't just have to apply for it today or in the next 2 or 3 weeks. There's a longer period of time, extended period of time. The thing that I hit with Lindsay though, that you should remember, that if you applied for an EID loan to the $10,000, it is taken off that piece. So it's times 2% plus whatever you got for your EID, they're going to subtract from the total portion. And I talked with Mark Mayer from KBS this morning to get a true understanding of what they were saying there, and I am correct in what I'm saying. Greg Tatro, it looks like you had a question for me. I'm sorry I'm jumping back and forth. Go ahead, Greg.
So to go along with Tim Cole's question, so if you had employees laid off throughout the winter and they weren't back to work yet, does the 80% apply to your total workforce laid off, or just what you had prior to the order?
So here's what I understood, is that my average was based on my audited salaries and taxes from last year. And we took an average of it. And then it can be used for the 8 weeks, and it's based on you calling back for the forgiveness side 80% of those people that are referenced within that average monthly salary. I answered you, you didn't like my answer. So if you're taking the average monthly salary from last year and using that as your average, then what they're looking at is a callback of 80% of that average monthly salary. Right?
No, so it's not necessarily people, it's monetary.
Correct. But it's referenced as people, meaning your average, if you looked at your average employment over last year and said, okay, my average monthly employment is 23 people, then over that 8-week period, I have to have my 23 people, at least 80% of that 23 number in place in order to get forgiveness.
Thank you.
okay? Hey, and Greg, if that's not clear and you want to discuss that further with me, you know, you got my number. Then I'm seeing John Connor online. John, how are you? Or do you just keep raising your hand? Okay, I'm going down to John again.
Yeah, text question.
Tim Cole, did I answer your question, sir?
Yeah, you have several times. My concern is, so you want me to call back 80% of my workforce that's just been offered $600 extra
Oh,
for
God.
what they're getting right now, and they're gonna come running back.
Tim, I don't get it either. Okay, as a matter of fact, I got Matt sitting right here that we did the math for Matt, and yeah, I'm going to talk about, we did, and so we didn't do it for Matt. I'm using him as an example, but we figured it out, and I could take the off till August if I went on my unemployment piece and got my $600 and the pay and I could be gone till August. I don't know how they're going to handle that, and I know Matt keeps telling me that the minute that's not, the minute your job opens up, that piece, that $600, that unemployment piece, the minute you give a call back, that whole backside stops. Okay?
I'll make for some friendly employees, I can tell you that.
Yeah, I know. So,
You know, right now, we've elected to pay all the management people. There's about 15 guys we've kept on. But now
Right.
you're asking me, in order to qualify for this, I gotta call all the rest of them back. That's gonna be a little bit of a nightmare. It'd be easier for me to lay the management guys off.
yeah. And again, as you just heard, and I'm probably as knowledgeable as anybody about this right now, and I knew I had the administrator there stumbling a little bit because we were on a conference call till almost 11 o'clock last night talking this whole thing through, and the night before I snuck in on a conference call with a bunch of Vermont bankers to try to hear how they're going to be administering it. So I do apologize for the lack of knowledge, but I do see where it's going. I'm seeing Matt with his hand raised. Go ahead.
Richard, I just want to clarify the date for the PPP loan. I want to thank Tess for texting me for that. It is actually June 30th.
June 30th.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So she did clarify that that's good through June 30th, not December 31st, and I appreciate. Thank you, Tess. There are so many of these different loan numbers and everything in front of us. With that, I think I have covered, I'm looking here, I wanted to cover the loan piece, I wanted to tell you about the birdhouse piece, I did that. Oh, last thing
We got some questions in the chat.
in the chat. Deborah Wright, AM, doesn't that mean if the same employees don't come back, you could hire new replacement ones? I can't answer that. I would say yes, you can. As long as your employee count, the way I understood this, your employee count has to be at 80% of what it was a year, in that same average given time. Yes. Then somebody said, I hope you don't run out of paper plates. It's not me that's gonna run out of paper plates. It's my wife or the local pizza shop. The last thing, as we get ready to go back, and I'll turn it over to Matt here in half a second, is, again, I would recommend you all go out, download, or if you want me to send it to you, we have been working with OSHA, Homeland Security, 4 or 5 other groups, and we have created a sample plan for exposure prevention, preparedness, and response. We have put together a boilerplate plan. I will tell you up front, on top of everything else going on top of everything else, the way it's all happening and coming at us, I got an email from OSHA yesterday that said, we're really overwhelmed right now. We're just over our heads. We've got all people on deck, and we're out doing inspections on those companies that are still operating, asking for their COVID response plan, and nobody has one. And we are out there enforcing a COVID response plan as part of their normal safety and health programming. So on top of everything else, we have found time to do some compliance stuff. So do be aware of that. We do have one out there, and I'm actually thinking that next week sometime, we've got 2 trainings coming up for sure. We have a training for fall protection on Tuesday morning. For any of you that want to join us or whatnot, go to our website and have your people join us for a fall protection training. And then on, I believe it's Wednesday, we're going to do an MSHA course for anybody that wants to join us for that. You can register out at agcvt.org. And then I believe at some point next week we are going to do a overview of this COVID response plan and what you should have in place. So the last 2 things, and I'll turn it right over. The last 2 things are Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. We have a scheduled meeting with the Agency of Transportation. Anybody that wants to join us for the scheduled meeting with the Agency of Transportation, you're welcome to. And there's 50 seats out there, so I would register quickly and fast. That is going on, and it is going to be on how we mobilize and how we start to bring people back into this, and those jobs that are going to be quickly opened for us to continue through. That's going to happen on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, and then we'll see you all back here Friday, either at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock. And with that, I'm going to take my paper plates. I'm going to try to remove everything I have now touched on this screen, and I'm going to step to my left and allow Matt to come in on the right. Go ahead, Matt. I'm moving. I'm moving. It's like we're tied to a rope, by the way.
Yeah, we're not from the theater, so we don't really get the whole stage left, stage right thing, so bear with us there. And if you're worried about our safety, I just want to let you know that AGC does have a very large supply of hand sanitizer, and we shower when we walk through the door with a chemical sprayer. So just be aware your staff is safe, and we're here to look out for you. So I just wanted to talk a little bit today about what's going on with government. I'm going to do what I can here to unmute Tess Kennedy, who's with us as well.
You're going to have to go to the mic. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I don't know why that doesn't work well.
That's okay. Today. We're good. We're good. So while we're watching this stuff unfold over the last couple of weeks, we've been continuing to monitor what's going on up at the legislature. And Tess, I really appreciate your help with that. So last week we talked a lot about the unemployment programs that have come out of both the state and federal government. And this week, legislature went back to look at some other things. They're continuing to look at the workforce bills. I know that there's a lot of different conversations that are going on. I'm going to hold off on getting into chatter until they really start getting into some meat. I'll open it up to Tess in a minute if there's something that went on in the Senate call this morning while we were preparing for this that I didn't hear. But you know, monitoring the Transportation Committee this week, they're still moving forward with a couple of bills. They have a DMV bill, they have a transportation bill, which both are known as must-pass bills. The Agency of Transportation has actually got involved and put together a list of things that they would like to see come out in the transportation bill understanding that the priorities of the legislature this year is just to get out the really important stuff, to deal with the COVID response, and then if they have time left, they might look at some of the other bills. So some of the stuff that they had been working on will likely fall on the floor and stay there, and for better or for worse, some of it's good for us. As far as the T-bill, some of the must-pass provisions that they had put in there relate to miscellaneous things that we don't deal with. A lot of it was language cleanup. But one of the things that I thought was very interesting that were in that could be very good for us when we come out of our shutdown state is that they actually are proposing, AOT has proposed to House Transportation Committee that they would, if we have federal transportation dollars come available through a stimulus program, that they'll have permission to spend that money above what their appropriation was originally, and that AOT, who generally when they make their proposals outlines the projects that they're going to do, and that comes up with a larger budget, which our legislature then decides on, have actually asked that AOT be granted permission to reallocate funds where the needs are greatest, and that includes a lot of road, bridge, culvert repair, other paving issues and such. So it will give them the ability to kind of be a little bit more nimble within that. The other bill that they're talking about too, we actually were scheduled to come in and testify on Wednesday, but due to, I believe, the Speaker of the House's direction, committee chairs are actually looking at what are must-pass issues and what are things that we can wait till next year. They are dealing with a number of different challenges. It was a little bit hilarious to read the Vermont Digger article about what happened on one of their web forums. We don't have that problem here. Go-to training is a completely secure platform. We won't have any issues. The DMV bill, we were asked to come in and talk about some of the work zone safety issues, and we're going to continue to push for that, but I do think, with the exception of the DMV must-have list, which are things like people being able to renew, things to do with inspections, general language cleanups, we're likely not going to see a lot of those add-on things that we want to see in there. But we're going to continue to keep pushing for them. At the worst case scenario, maybe we have to come back next year, but we are in the middle of a crisis. Another bill that was passed and signed into law on Monday by the governor was H742, which is another bill to deal with the COVID issues. And there's a lot of fixes for healthcare and insurance. It's approximately 40-page long bill, and there's a lot of fixes for healthcare, for insurance, so that healthcare providers can figure out how to get licensed with the Office of Professional Regulation and that they don't run into any challenges. One of the things as employers it's important to understand is there is some language in that changes the eligibility for unemployment claims and the ability for some of your staff members to self-terminate their employment and go on unemployment related to COVID. So number one, if someone gets sick, of course they can enact this. If they are advised by a doctor or are showing symptoms of having COVID, they can release themselves from work. If they have a loved one, a family member, an immediate family member, and that's parent, grandparent, brother, foster, etc., immediate family member gets sick that they have to care for, that is an eligibility for them to self-terminate. And one that's a little bit controversial, and I think this is something that we want to pay attention to and why we've created our guidance document that we're going to release next week for our members, is that if an employee feels that they are unnecessarily or unreasonably in an unreasonably risky situation, meaning their employer isn't either following the OSHA guidelines or CDC guidelines or State Department of Health guidelines, they can actually make the claim that they're in an unreasonably risky place and they can self-terminate at that point. There are gates that are built around it, like I just mentioned, with having the advisement from CDC as well as OSHA, etc. And I think it is going to be kind of a tough bar to meet if the employer is in fact doing the things the right way, and that's the social distancing and all of the other best practices that we've talked about, and we're going to release that soon here. By the end of the day, this will be on the website if it's not already. So those are a couple of the policies that have been kind of bubbling up. Tess, did you want to add anything that you've seen that maybe I haven't been while we're running around here?
No, I think you covered most stuff. I think there's a little bit of confusion on what AOT is asking to do in this transportation funding bill. It's the annual funding bill. I think they're just trying to cost shift some already approved funds because they can't go out and start new projects right now is my understanding because of your, April 15th and who knows beyond that. And so
We're just saying
they
April
have
15th.
a list of 5 categories of projects included in the bill.
Yep.
And it's a very specific list, and those are ongoing projects. And someone referred to them with a acronym. They're called IDIQ activities,
We know what those are.
which is indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity. And contractors, many are under retainer to do these types of projects. I guess the best example I think of is when you have pretty bad stretches of road, like where I live on Route 14, that need to just have top coats put on them so it's actually safe to drive on. I'm not quite sure how those contracts work, but it was my impression that type of work could be moved forward. And then once this additional federal stimulus package that is being talked about, and the way Agency of Transportation representatives talked, it is a very likely thing to happen in Congress as the 4th package, which is all about stimulus. They can, again, shift funds into planned projects. And they also indicated that the next stimulus package will not have the restrictions of needing to be COVID-19 related. The way the current CARES Act, all of that money that's coming to Vermont, $2 billion, it really has to be COVID-19 related. So people are getting very creative on that. It is AOT's understanding the next stimulus package will not have those kind of strings tied.
Okay, good.
And also, Matt,
Yep.
an update, because I did see a lot of people ask questions about the PPP, that loan program. And if you were, the fact sheet that they've put out on the federal and state level might answer a lot of people's questions. It's a pretty informative fact sheet on how the loan works.
Cool. Good.
That's it.
Great. Appreciate it. So I'm just looking here. Got their COVID plan done yesterday, now being reviewed by management. We should have a great. Deborah Wright has working on their plan and should have it out to employees by Monday. Great, good work. So that brings me to and let me open up the floor real quickly because I know you may have questions and hopefully we have answers. So just unmuted everyone so everyone can hear you. Does anybody have any questions?
And interestingly, the joists looked identical. I mean, they're
Okay, someone's having a conversation, so I'm going to go ahead and just mute everybody. If you have a question, just throw it in the text box for me, and I'll go ahead and field it. So I just wanted to, we're coming up on the hour here, so I'm going to be really quick to give you the last update of what we're doing here with the government affairs team. So number one, I just have a small request for everyone. This is a really challenging time, and I know that 95% of our folks that are out there are following these executive orders, are looking out for things. One of the things that we've been doing here at AGC since this executive order came down and since the addendum to the order that addressed crossing state lines has come down is that we've been working with a number of folks on, can I go across the border? Can my person come back and forth? Is there enforcement? How is this going to look? What happens if I get caught? Well, okay, so number one, the rule is very clear. And Lindsay just was very clear about what that rule is. Someone has the ability to go back and forth across our border if they're doing a service that's essential to Vermont. So that means that if you have someone that's going to build a home or going to pave a driveway across the border and then they come back into Vermont that same day, they have to go in self-isolation for 14 days. I bring this up because there's two components to this. Number one, there's the regulatory component, which right now there's no enforcement. They're not pulling people over. They're not asking for you to tell them what you're doing. But if they keep seeing us going back and forth, potentially we could trigger some sort of enforcement action, which wouldn't be good. The other side of this, and after having conversations with a number of attorneys, insurance agents, etc., there is another component to this. If as an employer we ask somebody to get in their car, drive across the border for a day job and come back and forth, and we're not following the rules of this order, and let's say that individual becomes exposed over in New Hampshire, New York, or Massachusetts, or Maine, comes back and exposes people in their family, and let's say they had a parent that passed away as a result, and they were able to trace this back, and the employee could show that the employer was negligent in asking them to go across the border and back, that leaves you wide open. And I just think that that's one piece of the conversation that we haven't been having, is that there's a liability component to your employees. So help us help you. Try to follow the law. If you have questions, call Richard, call our hotline here, and we'd be happy to talk about different situations. So now on to what we're going to do to get you back out on the road. Monday morning, our Government Affairs Committee meets. At noon, our Board of Directors meets, and we're going to discuss how we're going to move forward responsibly to get you back out on the road on April 15th or as soon as possible. And part of that conversation that we're having, and thank you members for bringing this up, is that this is going to require us to not only have a date that's certain that we can go back, but we have to have the ability for the agencies to prep for us to go back to work, meaning BGS and AOT have to be willing to start the bidding process again and have to get their ball rolling so that we can get ours rolling so that we can get out the door as soon as possible. So things that we're going to be talking about next week and that we're already involved with are a multi-state coalition with AGCs across New England. We're going to put together a letter and present it to the governor and go forward with that as a unified front with the idea that we want to bring Vermont into parity with the other states while being responsible for the care of our staff, meaning we're going to have protocols in place. It's very, very easy for us to understand that construction, with the exception of healthcare, is probably one of the most health and safety regulated industries in the world. We are familiar with keeping people safe, whether it be from chemicals or falls or road traffic, for example. So we are already doing that. So we're going to work in our multi-state coalition. I've had other business trade organizations contacting us. We're going to have an 8-state coalition. We currently already work with a group of about 30 people, and more building trades keep continuing to contact us. So we're going to have a loud voice. We're going to talk about press releases. We're going to talk about grassroots efforts with our members, contacting their representatives. But most importantly, we want to do this in a responsible way. We want to do this in a way that we say we would like to get back out on the road, and we want to do this responsibly to keep everybody safe, because ultimately if we go back out on the road and we don't do it the right way and we still are exchanging these germs that are out there, even if we're allowed to go back to work and half your staff is sick on a regular basis, it's not going to help anything. So that's what we have coming up next week. We're going to continue to push. We're launching our online training sessions next week using the same technology, and you can expect a lot more from your association. So before I let everybody go, because Governor Scott is going to have a press conference starting in about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, I'm going to open the floor. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
You do that, and it comes back, instead of having one great big stock, now you have like 10. The stuff is like, you couldn't engineer a more.
Well, we got somebody in an office having a phone conversation, which is great. That means people are working. Any questions that are on chat? I had to turn off the volume just because I don't want anyone giving away any trade secrets while we're on these calls. With no questions, I think we did a pretty good job. Tess, thank you for coming today. Lindsay, if you're still out there, really appreciate your time. Thank you, AGC, and we look forward to continue to serve you. Have a great day.